Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Our guests, actress Susan Brown and author Morrie Ruvinsky, are in the studio ready to be profiled. Actress Susan Brown was born and raised in San Francisco. After high school, she came to SC, University of Southern California, my alma mater, to study drama. And then Susan went to New York. After a stint in LA, she had worked here, and she went back to New York, where she studied at the American Theater Wing and spent 10 years in New York and doing summer stock, off-Broadway, and TV. What then brought you back to LA again?
Well, I'd done a lot of theater, and I'd been on tour, the national tour with Melvyn Douglas in Inherit the Wind for about a year, and then there wasn't much television. The great era of the golden age of television was dying in New York, and it was all moving to California. And so, you know, in order to survive and earn a little more money than you could off Broadway and even on Broadway in those days, I thought, well, maybe I should investigate it. And coming from California, you know, I came back and kind of saw an agent here, and then I got a call to go back to New York because they didn't know I was here, and I thought, no, don't tell them.
Isn't that the way it happens?
Yeah, always. And
what were you doing? What did they want you to come back and do in New York?
Come back and do a, a U.S. Steel, I think, was a show at that time, and I did that. And then I came back here, and then I got a job here,
But did you come actually to do TV?
Really, yes, because I knew that, you know, and film, and I had not done a lot of film, and I thought, you know, maybe perhaps that was the way to go and a way to earn more money.
But you were doing, you've done guest spots on Frasier and Beverly Hills 90210 and Barney Miller, and a lot of episodic, is that what they call it?
Exactly.
But you've also done daytime for 20 years.
For a long time, yeah, I kind of combined them, which
How do you do it?
but-
How did that happen?
Well, I wasn't always under contract in daytime, but I managed to do a lot of soaps, and then I landed on General Hospital, and then I've been there off and on for about 20 years. Now, General Hospital did a spin-off, which was a little unusual for a soap opera, and took people from General Hospital to a show called Port Charles.
Oh, that's the spin-off?
That is the spin-off of General Hospital, because General Hospital is in a place called Port Charles.
I see.
So that's how we ended up in Port Charles, with Scotty Baldwin and his father and me and Mrs. Baldwin and Gail Baldwin and all of us, and we have 2 grandchildren now, and so we have our whole family transported to Port Charles.
So this just made your life.
Oh, it was great. It was like, I call it a gift from God, that show.
You didn't ever get sick of doing it?
No, never.
Was it hard? Is it hard for you? I mean, how do you get your material, you read it at night, you have to perform it the next day?
Yeah, but you kind of get in the mode of that, you know, and I don't have that much. I don't have 30 or 40 pages like I used to have when I was a lot younger. You know, you'd get it, and it was a lot. It is a lot. It's a baptism of fire every day. But
everyone always used to make fun of daytime and the soap operas, but I can't imagine a better place to learn how to act.
It's true. I think it's true, and there are a lot of wonderful actors there. And the boy who plays my son, Ken Schreiner's been there a long time, and he's great fun. And Peter Hansen, who plays my husband, and it's just, so it's like family. It's like your other family.
Before you moved to Port Charles, you were nominated for an Emmy.
I was, for General Hospital, yeah. I didn't win, but it was fun to be nominated,
But
and the man who plays my husband did win.
Oh, he did?
Peter won, that
so
year
it was part of the...
It was great, yeah.
When you did guest appearances on these other shows, were you still doing your daytime shows?
Yes, but then I was off of hospital for a while, and then I did a lot of episodic, and I did a wonderful 3-part series called The Final Days, about the Nixons, their final days in the White House.
Oh, you did?
Written by Woodward and Bernstein, and from the book.
But did you do that at the same time you were doing?
No, I was off the show then. I was off the show. I was
You were
off
General Hospital, and they hadn't spun off the other one, so you had time.
I had time there, a gap.
And how long was that? Was it on tour?
It was on 2 nights, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I think it was quite a good show, really. Lane Smith played Nixon.
I have the picture.
And I played Pat Nixon.
How did you research that?
Well, everybody was very involved with the book, but I didn't.
Is this you, actually?
That's me.
With this blonde wig?
Yeah, I didn't. I read Tricia Nixon's book about her mother, and I had not known a lot about Pat Nixon, except, you know, I lived through those times, and I certainly watched Watergate, etc. But she was really quite a woman. People thought she was very quiet and submerged, but she did many things that people didn't know about. She was the first time the White House was ever lit. The White House was not lit.
From the outside?
From the outside. And when you went to see the monuments in Washington, you know, whether it was Lincoln or the Washington Monument, you know, you could always see it at night, but when she, as a congressman's wife, went to take people, they couldn't see the White House at night.
That's very interesting.
So she got this idea to light the White House at night, so the lights would come on, and she didn't tell Dick Nixon about it. They went to China and did all that business in China, and on the way back, she had hired landscape people to do this. And as they flew back from China, she told them they would light the lights. And the pilot came over from Air Force One, and she said, "Look out the window," and he looked out the window, and there it was, and he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that she kept it a surprise. He couldn't believe that that was happening. And then he said, "Can we go buy it again?" And so he had the pilot go buy the White House again.
Were those things in the script?
Yes, no. But that was
your
in
research?
her book, and that was, I wanted to know about her. Really wanted to know about her.
So she wasn't such a meek, under his thumb kind of person.
She was very much her own person, I think, and she was very much loved when she went to all these foreign countries. She was a wonderful ambassador for all of us she went to. She didn't have a lot of fanfare. She didn't take a lot of makeup people and hair people with her. She just went. And they loved her. She went to orphanages, and she had been a teacher, and so she was very helpful. She was the first one to change the dress in the White House. Before, in the White House, all the guards and people you ran into were in a uniform, and she thought it was much too formal, and she put them in gray slacks and blue blazers coats,
Is that right?
which they wear to this day. But she didn't get a lot of credit for these things, you know. She just did them quietly in her own way, and was devoted.
You had to research all of this to get the feeling of playing this role, because you looked just like her.
and I wanted to like her, and they gave
and you wanted to like her because
wigs, and they gave me a wonderful wig, and they gave me all those clothes, and when you saw those pictures and they researched it to a T, that it was, you know, you really began to.
Did you have any movies? Did you have any footage that you could see the way she walked or talked?
There was footage that they made available to us, yes. The fortunate thing, or unfortunate thing, was that they always caught Pat Nixon was very silent, and I didn't speak. I was the only character who never spoke. But they, at the end of the picture in Air Force One, when they entered that and went back to California when it was all over,
the final day. Yes.
They had a breakdown scene, but they cut it, and the director called me and he said, "Susan, I'm sorry, because I thought there was this great emotional scene. Finally, you saw her break down."
Really feel.
And he said, "But it seems disturbing when you haven't spoken throughout the film to have you do that there, so they cut it out.
But it
was okay.
But it
I
meant
understood. Yeah,
what happened.
Yeah.
Now this is very peculiar. Peculiar, not peculiar Susan Brown, but peculiar because you also played Nancy Reagan.
I know. Yes.
How do you get the? Are you going to play Hillary next?
I don't know.
You have a lot of wives left to play.
If I keep putting on weight, I'll be ready for Mrs. Bush, you know. But she,
I'm going to show a picture of that.
That was the Brady story. It was really about the Bradys, and the Reagans were peripheral, not, of course, to James Brady and Bo. I think won the Emmy that year. For,
and what was
James
this?
Brady?
He played James Brady,
Yes,
Bo Bridges.
Yes, and Joan Allen played his wife.
Oh right.
Who later played Mrs. Nixon in the film that Oliver Stone did.
Right.
But
well, how did you get into this part?
People called and I went for the audition and just worked out that way, you know.
And did you research Nancy the same way?
Well, I was much more familiar with Nancy Reagan, and it wasn't, you know.
Do you know her?
No, but
But you've seen her, and so you knew how she walked.
Yes, and I did get to speak in that, but not in the other. But the other one was really very interesting in spite of it.
Did you like one character more than the other?
Well, I guess I put more time into Mrs. Nixon because I knew less about her, and was intrigued with her and really what she had done, and her loyalty to him,
yes,
and her loyalty to this family, and I became a big admirer of hers, really.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Back to Port Charles just for a minute, because you've been on it for several years, and you were on General Hospital. How do you keep yourself interested? And how do they write material that's interesting to you?
Well, it's always changing. I play a psychiatrist as well as a mother and grandmother, and so, you know, there's that side to it, and it's always changing. It's always fresh and new, and twists and turns, and our grandchild went blind, and then we were lost in a snowstorm, and, you know, I mean, there's always
something. Could you write this? Could you write it?
No.
Could you write this episode?
No, but I think people's lives are soap operas, you know,
Really,
and I think that's really why they're so interested in soap operas, because what is stranger than people's lives, you know, or wilder, or
really,
or more moving, or touching, or whatever, you know.
But aside from that, you have a life of your own. You do a lot of other things.
Well,
you decorate.
Yes, I did.
And I was looking at your bio, and I saw names like L'Amour and Tomai and Archer, and I was like, where do you have time to do this?
I've had a lot of wonderful people in movies and television, like Anne Archer and Concetta Tomai and Kathy L'Amour.
Have you worked with did you work with those people?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
you did?
Homes, yeah. And so they were friends, and I knew them.
But did you work in the theater with them, in films? Or they were just friends?
No, they were just friends.
And then you decorated their houses?
Yeah.
And I know you've done some things from Kathleen Spiegelman, who does our sets.
Oh, I know. Wonderful things.
She's so great.
Wonderful things. She has a beautiful, beautiful showroom.
Doesn't she? She has the greatest.
Yes.
And my daughter works there. But the point is, she does such wonderful things, and you come in. I don't know when you have time to do it, but you
well, I have a lot
also
of days
decorate.
Off. Yes, yeah. I found some beautiful things there.
And the other thing that was so great, when I finished my workout today, I told the trainer, Dan. Do you know Dan?
Yes, La Jeunesse.
Dan La Jeunesse, that I was interviewing Susan Brown.
Trainer, yes.
And he said, well, I've trained her. She's fabulous.
Well, he was a friend of mine, Kathy L'Amour's trainer, and then when she would take trips and things and with Louis, then, you know, she'd say, well, you can come out and work out with Dan, which was a fabulous experience.
Kathy L'Amour went to Westlake, where I went to school.
Oh, that's right.
Yes,
she did indeed.
She went to Westlake.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think she would remember me. But she married one of the famous
writers of all time.
Famous Western writers of all time, Louis L'Amour.
And other things he wrote.
And other things, but that was such a loss, wasn't it?
A great loss, a great human being and a great writer. But, you know, they found a lot of his stories. And his Bo and Kathy, his son, have collected and put together, and they produced a book almost every year since Louis'
Oh,
death.
so they keep,
That-
can keep
that Louis had,
his work alive. Well,
so-
our time is
Oh,
over.
well, thank you.
We
It's
have
a
to
great-
work out
great fun.
together.
Yes, yes, we will.
With Dan, and we have to go to Kathleen's and have breakfast, lunch,
Yes,
and dinner there.
indeed, indeed.
And thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much.
Don't go
Joan.
away, because we'll be back with author Morrie Ruvinsky. So that was great. I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with writer, producer, and director Morrie Ruvinsky. Morrie was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. He comes from a huge family of storytellers. After graduating from McGill University, Morrie went to NYU. Not NYU, he went to New York City to write. And he was writing advertising copy, and he was working in political campaigns. And he was using all of these skills that were directly related to storytelling, I think, and to his upbringing. As a writer and a producer, you made a lot of TV shows and films. Let's talk about how you got into that from ad copy.
Well, from ad copy, it was quite extraordinary. Somebody offered me a fellowship to go to UBC to write. And I thought, well, that's an extraordinary idea. They would pay me to write. I'd never.
Oh, you never thought about that?
No, I never thought that was imaginable. I understood advertising, but to make up fiction and get paid for it seemed extraordinary. So I went to UBC, and I was doing graduate work there, and somebody lent me an old Bell & Howell Filmo 70D camera. It was a big, clunky, heavy steel camera.
In the back, kind of opened and
Yeah,
closed,
so-
you put a magazine in it.
And I made my first short film. It was such a strong camera. The first day shooting was at a bank, and I put the camera on the tripod, really not knowing what I was doing, and the camera immediately fell off the tripod. Nothing happened to the camera, but it shattered the marble floor.
You're
in the
kidding.
bank, so
That's
that was pretty extraordinary. I made this short film that was put on a show nationally for new young filmmakers, and I thought, what an easy way to make a living. You go out and shoot a little film, and they put it on the air. I discovered since then it's a little more difficult than that, I think. But it started with that, and that's what got me interested in it. And living up in Canada, I made 2 more art films, low-budget films that won prizes at places like the Berlin Film Festival and the Edinburgh Film Festival.
so they showed in good places.
In good places.
Yes, very good places. I thought the funny thing on your bio was your list of jobs.
Ah,
Furniture factory,
yeah, worked in a furniture factory, absolutely, cutting wood and pressing it.
pharmacist.
Yeah, that's how I worked my way through college, actually.
How?
It was illegal.
Oh, it was illegal.
It was illegal, but the pharmacist gave me his books and taught me how to do it, and after a couple of months, I was in charge of the night shift, and I worked the night shifts while going to college.
I thought, wow, this guy's really terrific. He went to pharmacy school, then he was writing
No.
ad copy.
No, didn't go to pharmacy school. This was all done, it was illegal. I don't think you can do it anymore, but in those days it was possible. I guess there was a real shortage. And I always had doctor friends and pharmacist friends looking over my shoulder if I had any problems, and it was an extraordinary experience. Taught me to be real careful when I was being professional.
I was going to say, also you taught at McGill.
Taught at McGill, yeah.
You went to McGill and you taught at
I went to
McGill.
McGill, and then I came back to McGill some years later and taught. I taught a huge class of about 400 people, and that wasn't working very well. I didn't like getting up in front of 400 people and speaking, so I wrote a course called Introduction to Film, and it was a 12-volume modular course in which we broke the class into small groups, and that was a lot of fun. That was a course that got transported to lots of other schools, and a lot of other people taught that course.
What did I leave out? I can't remember everything that was on that list. That was was a long list.
I have no idea. The most important job was of course being a single mother. When my daughter was 2.5 years old, I became a single mother and gave up at that point my directing career because I couldn't leave the house all the time.
Where was that?
That was originally in Toronto.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh, because you went to New York, then you went back to Vancouver.
I went to
and
Vancouver, where the roots of this novel, Dreamkeeper, started.
Is that how Dreamkeeper got started?
Well, Dreamkeeper got started because I spent a lot of time learning about the peoples of the Northwest Pacific Coast when I was in Vancouver. And then I sort of forgot about it and put it away for many years.
Oh, because I was going to say the book came a long time after that.
Much later.
Because you did the Highlander in between.
Yes, Highlander was great fun.
Was it all part of your storytelling experiences, or did part of Vancouver come back into your mind?
Well, I think I was my wife Alicia and I do a lot of work together, and we had just done 3 movies back to back. And I decided it was time, with her encouragement, to go back to writing fiction, which I loved and wanted to do. And I was looking for subject matter. And we actually took a trip up to Vancouver to talk about a television series. The television series didn't work out, but some of the ideas that came up from that visit got incorporated into Dreamkeeper. And that reminded me of my experiences years ago.
I see. How did the two, you're telling us a little bit, but I'm sure there are more comparisons between Dreamkeeper, which is your new novel, your first novel.
My first novel.
Your first novel, and Highlander, which you had written a lot for.
Mm-hmm. Well,
are they the same process?
No, very different process. Television and filmmaking is a very visceral process. It's always present tense, and you're trying to create images.
And you have to do it right away, right?
You have to do it right away, and it's very fast. And you know, when you're writing a television series, that on page 18 you're going to have a commercial, and the first act better come to a crashing close. In a novel, you're dealing with words, and words are more symbolic, and there are ways to move the story along that aren't about action, that aren't about somebody walking through a door and going, "Stick 'em up." In a novel, you can move the story along with thoughts, with ideas, with problems that you can't deal with in the movies. So the exciting thing about writing a novel is dealing with words, and words are symbolic and full of ideas.
But the thing with the TV or writing a script or a movie or what, somebody's there editing you and editing, and when you write your own novel, they edit you and then they put it on.
That's right.
But when you're writing your own novel, so someone else is applying themselves to you. When you're writing your own novel,
right.
You're actually editing. You can, I mean, it could take you forever because maybe you don't like these words. You say words move you along. You could go back and.
Well,
what makes you stop? When's it finished?
Right. Well, the curse and the blessing of freedom is exactly that. You can go on forever, and somehow you have to learn when it's good enough, when it's done.
Yeah. How do you know that?
I don't know how you know that. Somebody takes it away from you and says. Which is what happened with this book. I actually wrote the first draft thinking I would put it in a drawer and go back to work in movies and television, and then take it out again and rework it. Instead of which, I sent the first draft off to an agent in New York who loved the book and sold the first draft. And when I came back to do revisions and do second and third drafts of the novel, there were at that point people looking over my shoulder. More importantly, because I work all the time with Alicia on movie stuff, Alicia was my in-house editor. I could wake her up in the middle of the night and say, read this, and she would go, I'm going to kill you, but she would read it.
But she would read it, and then you'd rewrite it, or not rewrite it?
Well, I have enormous faith in Alicia's eyes because we work so much together and live together. There's lots of shorthand going on, so having an in-house editor made this process, I think, a lot easier for me than it normally would be.
So when you, will this be made into a movie?
Well, we're talking to a couple of companies now about that. It wasn't, my purpose for writing the book was to get away from the movies, and for me it was a redemptive, restorative process doing that. But I think now that it's out and people are talking about it in movie terms, it would be very exciting to do it as a movie.
Tell us a little bit about it, because it is a story. I mean, a fantasy, a mystical kind of thing, and when you talked about your family being such storytellers, I was going to ask you if they were baloney made-up stories or if they were really stories.
They were all real stories, but like most real stories, they get sort of polished over the years.
Polished. Enhanced.
Well, I don't know, enhanced in terms of the storytelling. Alicia, I remember Alicia saying the first time she came to visit my family, and there were all these people sitting around the table telling stories, she noticed that nobody was listening. And she turned to me and said, everybody's talking, nobody's listening. And we all, listening? What is listening?
Yeah, we're telling a story,
right? Stories. So, but I guess in that kind of environment, storytelling becomes natural.
So this came naturally. Tell us a little bit about that. You want to tell us a little bit about the story?
Absolutely. The story is a story of that takes place both in the present and 200 years ago. It's a story that draws heavily on the mythology of the Northwest Pacific Coast Indians, mostly the Kwakiutl and the Haida and the people up along that coast. It's a story about the first white boy who comes to the West Coast and ends up being cursed by the three sisters of creation. And the curse is that he will become immortal. For most of us as human beings, the curse is that we are mortal, that someday we will die, and that sort of hangs over our heads. For Jason, the curse is that he loses his mortality, and in losing his mortality, he loses that which is human about him. So his quest throughout the book is to recapture his mortality, and in so doing, recapture his humanity. So the book is about transformation and redemption, all of which is spurred and propelled by love. And mostly it's just a very fast-moving and terrific story.
It's very fast-moving, I know. The other thing is, do you see yourself as Jason?
I see myself as all the characters in the book, including the sea lion, yes.
Well, he turns into a sea lion,
Yes,
right?
yes, he does.
Can we say that? Can we tell
Absolutely.
anything else about it?
Well,
Can we find out what happens
No,
when they go to
can't-
find him? I haven't finished the book yet.
No, can't tell you that part. Can't tell. But the story is he runs into these three sisters of creation who are goddesses who realize that without people, there can't be gods. That the gods and the people are intertwined and connected. So it's a very mythical and mystical book about the relation between the gods and the people.
Are there connections in your mind to the Greek goddesses or the Greek gods?
Absolutely. I think we live in a world which is a cauldron of mythology that always bubbles up in new stories, depending on the kind of culture it arises in. So I think all cultures still tell pretty much the same kinds of stories, and we decorate it a little differently according to how we see.
Because I was in Cyprus not long ago, and that's supposedly the birthplace of Aphrodite. And there's a book Agapi Stassinopoulos wrote, Conversations with the Goddesses. And when I was in Cyprus, Nicosia, Larnaca, you keep thinking about the goddesses. You kind of feel, you look at the sea, and it tells you.
Well, I think one of the terribly important things for me about writing this book, and one of the reasons I wrote this book, is I think the 20th century became a time of psychology, and it was a me century, and we lost touch with the rest of the universe. We thought of ourselves as being the center of the universe, and we are not that. We are players in the universe. Mythology, unlike psychology, teaches us about honor and morals and ethics and our connection to family and tribe and culture and country. And we've lost that. But when you get back to places like Cyprus, when you get back to the people of the Northwest Pacific coast, that stuff is alive. It's there. It's part of your being. It's part of who you are.
Because it was there in the first place,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Is that what you're
That's
saying?
right.
It was
because
there.
it was there, and because it's connected to everything. And I think we have to stop denying our connection to mythology.
But the funny thing is, people forget about those mythological kind of gods.
Well, but people don't. What we do is we dismiss mythology as being just myth. But the truth is that we live in a mythology. The Christian culture is a mythology. And a mythology, if you're inside the mythology, then it's religion. And if you're outside, it's just a myth.
Right.
So mythology remains very important to us, whether we call it that or not. And I think we sometimes make the mistake of not understanding that even the great religions that we live inside of have big messages to import to us that are not necessarily religious messages.
Well, I think you gave us a great message today, and your book then will follow this theme.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Morrie Ruvinsky, for being with us.
It was a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so happy you were here. Keep writing to us, 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, and we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.